The chandelier caught my sapphire necklace just right, throwing tiny rainbows across the white tablecloth. Everyone was smiling. Champagne bubbled in crystal glasses. The string quartet played something soft and elegant in the corner. This was supposed to be my night. 10 years of building my design company from nothing into something people actually respected. But I knew what was coming. I could feel it in the way Kalen's jaw tightened when the investor stood up to make a toast. In the way his fingers drummed against his wine glass. That little tick he got when he was about to say something cruel and call it a joke. To Leora Trent, Marcus raised his glass, his voice booming across the private dining hall. To her brilliance, her perseverance, and to her family's continued legacy. The room erupted in polite applause. Glasses lifted. Faces turned toward me, warm and congratulatory. Then Kalen laughed. Not a chuckle. Not a polite acknowledgement. A sharp, cutting laugh that sliced through the music and the clapping like a knife through silk. Legacy. His voice carried that edge I'd learned to recognize over 9 years of marriage. Well, we won't have one, will we? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. The applause died. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Someone's champagne glass clinked awkwardly against a plate. Kalen leaned back in his chair, that smug half-smile spreading across his face. My wife can't have children, but she does love pretending she can. I felt every eye in the room land on me.
Hot, heavy, pitying.
Sarah, my best client, looked away quickly. Marcus cleared his throat and sat down. The violinist missed a note. My chest tightened, but my hands stayed steady. I'd practiced this. I'd known he would do something like this. Maybe not exactly this, but something designed to humiliate me in front of everyone who mattered. Because that's what Kalen did. He made me small so he could feel big. I looked at him, really looked at him. At the designer suit I'd helped him pick out last month. At the watch his father had given him before he died. At the face I'd once thought was the most handsome thing I'd ever seen. You're right, Kalen.
My voice came out calm.
Quiet. Almost gentle. Pretending can be exhausting. He smiled wider, thinking he'd won whatever sick game he was playing tonight. He had no idea the game was already over. The cream-colored envelope sat in my purse under the table. I'd sealed it 3 days ago. Inside was a single sheet of paper that would end everything: his reputation, his company, his carefully constructed life. But not yet. I picked up my wine glass and took a slow sip, letting the silence stretch out like taffy. Letting him enjoy his moment. Because in about 20 minutes, when dessert was served and everyone was settled and comfortable again, I was going to stand up. I was going to thank everyone for coming. And I was going to hand him that envelope in front of every investor, journalist, and social elite in this room. The violinist started playing again, trying to smooth over the awkwardness. Conversations resumed in hushed tones. I smiled at the woman across from me and complimented her earrings. Kalen relaxed beside me, already moving on, already forgetting. But I didn't forget. I couldn't. Not the word he'd used on the phone 6 months ago when he thought I was asleep. Barren. Not the perfume I'd found on his shirts. Not the bank statements I'd discovered hidden in his office drawer. Revenge isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. Sometimes it just needs perfect timing. What would you do if someone humiliated you in front of everyone you knew? Would you walk away quietly, or would you make sure they faced the consequences? I was 26 when I met Kalen Trent, and I thought I'd found a fairy tale. The gala was at the Rosewood Estate, one of those places where even the air smells expensive. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, women in gowns that cost more than my rent. I was there because my boss had handed me an invitation last minute. Network, she'd said. Make connections. I wore a borrowed dress and fake confidence. Kalen found me by the champagne table, looking lost and trying not to show it. First time? His voice was warm, amused. Not mocking, just knowing. I turned and forgot how to breathe. Tall, dark hair perfectly styled, a smile that could sell anything. He wore his tuxedo like it was born on him. That obvious? I managed. Only to someone who remembers their first. He handed me a glass. Kalen Trent. The name meant something even then. The Trent family owned vineyards across 3 states. Wine bottles with their label sat in restaurants I couldn't afford. Leora, I said. Leora Hayes. Pretty name for a pretty woman. Cheesy line. Should have been a red flag. But he said it like he meant it, and I was young enough to believe him. We talked for hours. He made me laugh. Asked about my dreams. I told him about wanting to start my own design studio someday. He didn't laugh or pat my head like I was cute for trying. He leaned in, eyes serious, and said, "You will. I can see it." 3 months later, we were engaged. 6 months after that, I was walking down an aisle covered in white roses while photographers captured every angle. The wedding made it into 2 magazines. People called us a power couple before I'd even built any power. The honeymoon was in Santorini. White buildings against blue water, sunsets that looked painted. We spent mornings in bed and afternoons exploring villages that smelled like salt and olive oil. One evening, we sat on our villa's balcony, watching the sun drop into the Aegean Sea. Kalen had his arm around me, his other hand holding expensive wine. "This is just the beginning," he said. "We're going to build something incredible together. A family. A legacy." I leaned into him, warm and happy and stupid. "Our children will inherit perfection," he continued, his voice distant, almost cold. "The Trent name, your creativity, they'll be extraordinary." Something flickered in my chest. Unease. The way he said perfection like it was a requirement, not a hope. "What if they're just normal?" I asked, trying to sound playful. His arm tightened around my shoulders. "They won't be. We won't let them be." I laughed it off. Blamed the wine, the jet lag, my overthinking brain. But that word, perfection, echoed in my head long after the sun disappeared. I should have listened to that echo. Would you ignore a red flag if everything else seemed perfect? Or do you trust your gut even when you don't want to? The first doctor's appointment happened 2 years into our marriage. We'd been trying for 6 months. Nothing. Kalen suggested we make sure everything's working properly. His words, not mine. The clinic was sterile and cold. White walls, fluorescent lights that made everyone look sick. I sat on the paper-covered exam table while a doctor, who looked too young to know anything, asked invasive questions. Tests. Blood draws. Ultrasounds. Procedures with names I couldn't pronounce. Kalen came to the first 3 appointments. Held my hand in the waiting room. Said supportive things that sounded right. But by the 4th appointment, he started sending texts instead. "Sorry, stuck in a meeting. Let me know what they say." By the 6th, he stopped asking altogether. The doctor said everything looked fine with me. Kalen's tests came back normal too. "Sometimes it just takes time," she said with that practiced, gentle voice doctors use when they don't actually have answers.
Time. We had plenty of that.
Except time started feeling different.
Heavier.
Every month that passed without a positive test felt like proof of some failure I couldn't name. Kalen stopped touching me except when we were trying. Clinical. Scheduled. Like I was a project that wasn't delivering results. I threw myself into work. My little design studio was starting to get real clients, not just friends doing me favors. I worked late. Sketched until my hand cramped. Chose fabric swatches and color palettes instead of thinking about empty nurseries. One night, I came home around 11. The house was dark except for a light in Kalen's study. I heard his voice, low, laughing. I stopped in the hallway. "She's Barren," he said.
Casual.
Like he was commenting on the weather. My hand froze on the doorframe. No, we've done all the tests. Nothing's wrong, apparently. Just doesn't happen." He laughed again. "But she looks good for appearances, doesn't she? Good for the family image." I couldn't breathe. Couldn't move. "Yeah, I know. Trust me, I know." His voice dropped lower. "But divorce looks bad. Especially now with the company expansion. I just need to." I walked away before I could hear the rest. Went upstairs. Sat on the edge of our bed. The bed he hadn't slept in for 3 weeks.
Barren. The word sat in my chest like a stone. Cold. Heavy. Permanent. I didn't cry. Couldn't.
The tears were stuck somewhere behind the stone. When Kalen came upstairs an hour later, I was under the covers, eyes closed, pretending to sleep. He didn't check on me, just grabbed a pillow and left for the guest room. That's when I realized something I'd been avoiding for months. I was alone in my marriage. Had been for a while. Have you ever heard something you weren't supposed to hear that changed everything?
How did you handle it?
I became a ghost in my own house. That sounds dramatic, but it's true. I'd walk into a room, and Kalen would look right through me. Like I was furniture. Something that came with the place, but served no real purpose. Breakfast happened in silence. He'd read his phone, drink his coffee, leave without saying goodbye. Dinner, when we both happened to be home, was worse. We'd sit across from each other at that massive dining table his mother had picked out. 8 chairs. 2 people. Miles of polished wood between us. How was your day?
I'd ask, trying.
Fine. He wouldn't look up from his plate. We had friends over sometimes. That's when Kalen came alive again. Charming, funny, attentive. He'd touch my shoulder when he passed. Call me, darling, in front of guests. Play the devoted husband so convincingly I almost believed it myself. The second the door closed behind them, the mask dropped. Our bedroom stayed empty on his side. His clothes migrated to the closet in the guest room. His toiletries disappeared from our bathroom. Slowly, like he was erasing himself from my space. Or erasing me from his. I stopped asking him to come back. Stopped trying to fix whatever was broken. Just focused on my work. My company was growing, real growth, not just hope. I'd landed 3 major clients in 6 months. My designs were getting featured in local magazines. Kalen didn't notice. Or didn't care. One Thursday evening, I came home early. Found his car in the driveway. Unusual for 4 in the afternoon. I walked in and smelled it immediately.
Perfume.
Not mine. Something floral and young and obvious. My stomach dropped. I stood in the foyer, listening. Heard voices upstairs.
Low.
Intimate. I should have stormed up there. Made a scene. Demanded answers. Instead, I turned around and left. Drove to my studio. Sat in the dark office for 3 hours, staring at fabric samples and feeling nothing. When I finally went home, Kalen was in the kitchen, making himself a sandwich like nothing had happened. Hey, he said. I didn't know you were coming back. I work here, I said. I live here. Right. He took a bite, chewed slowly. I meant I didn't hear you come in earlier. So he knew. Knew I'd been there. Knew I'd smelled the perfume and heard the voices. He just didn't care enough to hide it better. Who is she? The question came out flat. Tired. Does it matter? He closed the sandwich bag, not looking at me. I guess not. He nodded, like we'd agreed on something reasonable. I'm staying downtown tonight. Business dinner runs late.
Sure. He left.
I stood in the kitchen, surrounded by granite countertops and stainless steel appliances, and all the expensive things that were supposed to mean we'd made it. I picked up his wine glass from the counter. Saw the lipstick stain on the rim. Not even my shade. That's when something shifted inside me. Not heartbreak. I was past that. Something colder. Clearer. I wasn't going to cry about this. Wasn't going to beg him to love me again. I was going to find out exactly what he'd been hiding. And then I was going to burn his entire world down. When did you realize you'd had enough? What was the moment that changed everything for you? The next morning I started digging. Not emotionally. I was done with emotions. This was practical. Methodical. I treated it like a design project. Research, planning, execution. Kalen thought I was weak. Breakable. Too nice to fight back. He was about to find out how wrong he was. I started with the obvious. His computer. He'd always been careless about passwords, used the same one for everything. His father's birth year plus his mother's maiden name. Took me 3 tries. His email opened like a gift. I spent the next week reading everything. Made copies. Took screenshots. Organized them into folders on a separate hard drive I kept locked in my studio. The affair was with Elira Monroe.
24.
Worked in his marketing department. Pretty in that generic Instagram way. He'd been seeing her for 8 months. But that wasn't the interesting part. The interesting part was the money. Kalen's father had died 4 years ago, leaving the wine company to Kalen and his brother, Marcus. Except Marcus lived in London and had no interest in running things. So Kalen had full control. And he'd been stealing. Offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Wire transfers labeled as consulting fees that went to shell companies he'd set up. Money siphoned from the business bit by bit, quarter by quarter. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. Maybe more. I sat in my studio at 2 a.m, staring at spreadsheets and bank statements, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Power. This wasn't about the affair anymore. This was bigger. I kept digging. Found emails to Elira where he'd promised to leave me once things settled down. Found receipts for jewelry I'd never seen. Found texts where he'd called me the ball and chain and dead weight. Each discovery hurt less than the last. By the end of the month, I had everything. Proof of fraud. Proof of affair. Proof that the man everyone respected was a liar and a thief. I printed the most damning documents. Put them in a cream-colored envelope.
Sealed it.
Then I planned my party. My company's 10th anniversary was coming up in 2 months. Perfect timing. I'd host a luxury dinner. Invite everyone who mattered. Investors, journalists, clients, socialites. Make it beautiful, elegant, memorable. And I'd invite Kalen, of course. I'd put him front and center. Let him feel important. Let him think everything was normal. And then, when everyone was watching, when the cameras were rolling and the champagne was flowing, I'd hand him that envelope. I'd let him open it in front of everyone. Let them see what I'd seen. Let them know what I'd known. Let them watch his perfect life collapse in real time. I worked on my company during the day, planned his destruction at night. My designs got better, sharper, bolder. Clients noticed the change. Said I seemed more confident, more focused. They had no idea. Kalen didn't notice anything. He was too busy pretending I didn't exist. One evening, 6 weeks before the dinner, he actually spoke to me. "You seem different," he said, studying me across the living room. "Do I?" I smiled.
Calm.
Unbothered.
Yeah.
Happier, maybe. Maybe I am. He frowned, like that didn't make sense. Like I wasn't allowed to be happy without his permission. "What are you planning for your anniversary thing?" he asked.
Something special, I said.
"You'll love it." He nodded and went back to his phone. I went back to my plans. 2 weeks before the dinner, I set up the email system. Programmed it to send copies of everything to every guest the moment Kalen opened that envelope. Automated. Unstoppable. 1 week before, I confirmed the guest list. Made sure Elira was invited. Made sure the biggest investors would be there. Made sure the journalists had front row seats. The night before the dinner, I couldn't sleep. Not from nerves. From anticipation. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, and whispered into the dark. "You'll open this when the world is watching." Tomorrow, Kalen Trent's perfect life would end. And mine would finally begin. Have you ever planned something so carefully that you knew exactly how it would unfold? What was it, and did it work? The evidence was everywhere, and Kalen had no idea. I'd spent 3 months building my case like a lawyer preparing for trial. Every email saved. Every bank statement copied. Every text message screenshot and organized by date. The offshore accounts were the gold mine. Kalen had been transferring money for 2 years, small amounts at first, then bigger chunks once he got confident. He'd labeled them as consulting fees, vendor payments, operational expenses. All fake. The real money went to 3 shell companies he'd registered under fake business names. From there, it flowed into personal accounts in the Cayman Islands. He'd stolen over $800,000 from his own family's company. I traced every transaction. Matched dates to emails where he discussed moving funds with someone named David Chun, his accountant, apparently. Found the contracts he'd forged with his father's signature. His father. The man who'd built that wine empire from nothing. Who'd trusted Kalen to protect it. Kalen had spit on that trust and cashed the check. The affair was almost boring compared to the fraud. Elira got expensive gifts, jewelry, trips, a car lease. All paid for with stolen money. He'd even rented her an apartment downtown. Told her he was investing in their future. I found emails where he'd promised to divorce me once the company restructuring was complete. Where he'd called me the old model and Elira the upgrade. Reading those didn't hurt anymore. They just made me more certain. I printed everything. Organized it into sections: financial fraud, falsified documents, affair evidence, witness statements. I'd quietly talked to 3 employees who'd noticed irregularities. Then I did something smart. I made copies and sent them to my lawyer.
Sealed.
Dated. With instructions to open them if anything happened to me, just in case Kalen got desperate. The cream-colored envelope sat on my desk for a week before the dinner. I'd stare at it sometimes, feeling its weight. One piece of paper inside. A summary. Simple words. Everyone here just received the truth about you. Check your phones. That's all it needed to say. The real delivery would happen digitally. I'd set up an automated system through a secure server. The moment Kalen opened that envelope, I'd be holding a remote trigger in my purse. Every guest would receive an email with attachments. All the evidence. Categorized. Undeniable. I tested the system 4 times. Worked perfectly every time. 2 days before the dinner, Kalen actually asked about it. Who's coming to this thing? Everyone important, I said, arranging flowers in the foyer. My board members? Of course. And investors. And some journalists covering business news. He nodded, pleased. Good for the company image. Exactly what I thought. He started to walk away, then paused. You've been different lately. A calmer. Maybe I've accepted things. Accepted what? I looked at him directly. That some people don't deserve second chances. He frowned but didn't ask what I meant. Just shrugged and left for work. I smiled at his back. The night before the dinner, I couldn't eat. Not from nerves, from anticipation. Like Christmas Eve when you're a kid and you know tomorrow will change everything. I laid out my dress. Navy blue, elegant, expensive. The sapphire necklace he'd given me years ago for fertility luck. I'd wear it as a reminder. I checked the envelope one last time.
Sealed. Perfect.
Then I checked my email system.
Armed.
Ready. I whispered to the empty room. You'll open this when the world is watching. Tomorrow night, Kalen would reach for that envelope thinking it was a gift or a thank you card or some gesture of corporate appreciation. Instead, he'd open the door to his own ruin. And I'd be standing right there, watching it happen. Have you ever been so prepared for something that you knew every detail would go exactly as planned?
What was that moment like?
The morning of the dinner, I woke up at 6. Not because I had to, because I wanted to see the sunrise. Wanted to remember what this day looked like before everything changed. The mansion I'd rented for the event was the same one where Kalen and I had hosted our first gala as newlyweds. Full circle. Poetic. I arrived at noon to oversee setup. The event coordinator was good, but I needed everything perfect. Chandeliers cleaned until they sparkled. Tables arranged with surgical precision. Place cards positioned exactly right. Kalen at the head table, surrounded by board members and investors. Elira 3 tables back, close enough to see everything. The string quartet arrived at 2. I had them practice twice. The lighting guy adjusted the dimmer switches until the ambience was exactly right. Warm enough to feel intimate, bright enough that everyone could see faces clearly.
Cameras.
I'd hired a photographer for the company archives. Really, I wanted documentation. Evidence.
Proof.
At 4, I went home to get ready. Kalen was already dressed, checking his phone, barely noticing me. What time should we leave? He asked. 6:30. We're hosting, so we should be early. Right. He didn't look up. I showered. Did my makeup carefully, not too much, just enough. Wore the navy dress that made me look powerful and untouchable. The sapphire necklace felt cold against my skin. In my purse, lipstick, phone, breath mints, and the remote trigger. Small, black, looks like a car key fob. One button. Press it, and the emails send. Kalen and I drove separately. I might have to leave early, he said. Business call with London.
Of course, I said.
Knowing he wouldn't make it to any call. Wouldn't make it anywhere after tonight. The mansion glowed when I arrived. Golden light spilling from windows. Valets parking cars. Guests in designer clothes stepping out like they were walking red carpets. I stood at the entrance, greeting everyone. Smile perfect. Handshake firm. Playing the gracious host. Marcus Brennan arrived. Major investor. Leora. 10 years. Incredible achievement. Thank you for being here. Wouldn't miss it. Where's Kalen? On his way. Board members. Journalists. Clients. They filtered in, accepted champagne, admired the decor. Elira came in wearing red. Bold choice. She looked nervous, kept checking her phone. I walked up to her, extended my hand. I'm so glad you could make it. She blinked, surprised. Thank you for inviting me. Of course. Kalen speaks so highly of you. Her face flushed. He's been a great mentor. I'm sure he has. Kalen arrived at 6:40, fashionably late, working the room like a politician. Shaking hands, laughing at jokes, playing the successful air. He kissed my cheek when he reached me.
Cold. Performative.
Everything looks great, he said. Wait until you see the surprise. His eyes narrowed slightly. Surprise? For later. After dinner. He nodded, already distracted by someone calling his name. Dinner started at 7. Appetizers, wine, polite conversation. I barely tasted anything. Just watched the clock. Watched Kalen hold court at his table, confident and oblivious. At 8:15, dessert arrived. Chocolate mousse with gold leaf. Pretentious and perfect. At 8:30, Marcus stood for his toast. To Leora Trent. To her brilliance, her perseverance, and to her family's continued legacy. Glasses raised. Applause. Then Kalen's voice cut through. Legacy? Well, we won't have one, will we? The room froze. My hand found the remote in my purse. My wife can't have children, but she does love pretending she can. I pressed my fingers against the button. Not yet. Not quite yet. You're right, Kalen, I said softly. Pretending can be exhausting. He smirked. I stood. Slowly. Every eye followed me. Before we end the night, I have something to share. I walked to his table. Pulled out the cream-colored envelope. You'll want to open this one, dear. The room went silent. What would you do in that moment? Walk away or watch it all unfold? Kalen stared at the envelope like it might bite him. What is this? He asked, trying to sound amused. But I heard the edge in his voice. A gift, I said. Open it. The room was so quiet I could hear the candles flickering. He tore the envelope open, pulled out the single sheet of paper. Read it once. Read it again. His face drained of color. Actually drained, like someone had pulled a plug. What? His voice cracked. What is this? I pressed the button in my purse. All around the room, phones started buzzing. Quietly at first, then louder as more people checked their screens. Marcus pulled out his phone, frowned, started reading. A journalist 2 tables over gasped. Another investor's eyes went wide. Kalen stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This is fake. You can't prove any of this. I don't have to prove anything, I said calmly. The documents prove themselves. Bank statements, wire transfers, emails with your signature, your words. More buzzing, more shocked faces. You forged these, he was shouting now. She forged all of this. Marcus stood up, his phone still in his hand. Kalen, these are your accounts, your transactions. I recognize the company routing numbers. I can explain. $800,000, Marcus continued, his voice hard. Moved into offshore accounts over 2 years. Falsified as consulting fees. A reporter started typing on her phone. Another raised his camera. Kalen's eyes darted around the room, looking for allies. Finding none. Then Elira spoke. Her voice was shaky, horrified. You said it was all legal. You said the money was yours. Every head turned to her. The apartment, she continued, standing now too. The car. You said you'd earned it. That your father left it to you. Elira, shut up. You told me you were leaving her.
She pointed at me.
You said once the company restructuring was done. I said shut up. The room erupted. Voices overlapping. Phones ringing. Camera flashes. I stood in the center of it all, perfectly still. The eye of the storm. Kalen turned to me, his face twisted with rage and desperation. You did this. You planned this. Yes, I said simply.
Why?
Why would you destroy everything we built? I leaned in close enough that only he could hear. You called me Barren. You humiliated me. You stole from your father's legacy. You treated me like I was nothing. He grabbed my arm. We can fix this. We can. I pulled away. There's nothing to fix, Kalen. You did this to yourself. I just made sure everyone could see it. Marcus was on his phone, already calling the board. The journalist was live streaming. Guests were gathering in clusters, comparing what they'd received. This is insane. Kalen shouted to the room. She's lying. The bank records don't lie, someone called out. Neither do the emails, another added. Security started moving toward him. I'd warned them there might be a scene. Kalen backed away, looking around wildly. This isn't over.
I'll sue you.
You'll do nothing, I said. Because if you come near me, if you threaten me, if you so much as send me a text, I have 3 copies of everything with lawyers who'll make sure the police get involved. Financial fraud. Embezzlement. Wire fraud. His mouth opened.
Closed.
Opened again. Nothing came out. I straightened my necklace. Smoothed my dress. You gave birth to your own ruin tonight, Kalen. All I did was hand you the scissors. Then I walked away. Behind me, the chaos continued. But I was done. Have you ever watched someone face the consequences of their own actions? How did it feel? The headlines hit before breakfast. I woke up in my hotel room. I hadn't gone home, and checked my phone. 53 notifications. Trent Air accused of financial fraud at luxury gala. Wine dynasty in crisis. $800,000 allegedly embezzled. Socialite's revenge. Wife exposes husband's theft at anniversary dinner. They had photos, video clips, quotes from guests. Marcus had given a statement. The board is launching an immediate investigation. Elira's Instagram was deleted. Kalen's LinkedIn showed unavailable. I ordered coffee and watched it unfold from my hotel window. By noon, the company's stock had dropped 18%. By evening, 27%. Kalen called 42 times. I blocked him. He sent emails. Deleted without reading. Flowers arrived at the hotel.
I sent them back.
His lawyer sent a cease and desist letter. My lawyer laughed and filed it away. The investigation moved fast. The board hired forensic accountants. They found everything I'd found, plus more. Apparently, Kalen had been skimming for 3 years, not 2. The total was over $1 million. Criminal charges were filed within a week. Wire fraud. Embezzlement. Falsifying corporate documents. Kalen tried to blame his accountant. David Chin immediately turned over emails proving Kalen had ordered every transaction. The mistress, Elira, cooperated with investigators in exchange for immunity. Confirmed the gifts, the apartment, the promises. Made Kalen look even worse. His family released a statement. We are shocked and saddened by these revelations. Kalen Trent no longer represents the values or interests of the Trent family business. Translation: You're on your own. I moved out of our house 2 weeks after the dinner. Packed only what was mine. Left the expensive furniture, the art, the things that had never really felt like mine anyway. Found a smaller place by the ocean. The kind of house where you can hear waves at night. Where nobody knows your name or your story. Peace is quieter than I expected. Kalen's trial was set for 6 months out. His lawyers tried to get the charges reduced. Prosecutors weren't interested. He lost the mansion first, seized as part of the fraud investigation. Then the cars. The vacation house in Napa. His brother Marcus took over the company, publicly apologized to investors, promised reforms.
The wine business survived. Barely.
Kalen didn't. Last I heard, he was living in a one-bedroom apartment downtown, working as a consultant for small companies who didn't bother Googling his name. Elira moved to another state. Started over. I didn't celebrate any of it. Didn't throw a party or toast my victory. I just breathed. For the first time in 9 years, I could breathe without something heavy sitting on my chest. 3 months after the dinner, I started planning something new. Not revenge. Not anger. Something that mattered. A foundation for women dealing with infertility and emotional abuse. A place where silence didn't mean weakness. Where struggling didn't mean failing. I called it the quiet bloom. Because not every seed shows life immediately. Some roots grow in silence, preparing for the right season. What would you build if you had the chance to start completely over? The charity gala was exactly 1 year after the dinner that ended my marriage. Same venue. Same chandeliers. Different purpose. I stood at the entrance, watching guests arrive. But this time, their smiles were real. The energy was different, lighter, warmer. No Kalen. No games. No hidden agendas. Just people who wanted to support something good. The quiet bloom had grown faster than I'd expected. We'd helped 60 women in the first year. Therapy funding. Support groups. Legal assistance for those escaping abusive relationships. The foundation became the thing I'd needed when I was drowning. Tonight's gala would fund another year of operations. Maybe 2. I wore a simple black dress. No sapphires. No armor. Just me. Sarah, my first major client and now a close friend, found me by the champagne table. You look happy. I am happy. It shows. She squeezed my hand. What you've built here. It's incredible. It's necessary. I corrected. That's better than incredible. The evening flowed smoothly. Dinner, speeches, a video showcasing the women we'd helped. Some of them were there, sharing their stories. The room was silent except for their voices. Strong voices. Clear voices. Voices that had found their power. When it was my turn to speak, I walked to the podium without notes. A year ago, I sat in a room very much like this one and learned something important. Silence can be mistaken for weakness. Gentleness can be mistaken for surrender. People leaned forward, listening. But the truth is, silence can also mean preparation. And when it finally speaks, the whole world listens. Applause. Warm and genuine. Some people tried to make me believe I was less because my body didn't do what they expected. Because my life didn't look like their plans. I paused, letting the words settle. But I wasn't barren. I was just growing something different. Something that mattered more than their approval. More applause. A few people wiped their eyes. So, to everyone here who's been told they're not enough, you are. To everyone who's been silenced, speak. To everyone who's waiting for the right moment, it's now. The room stood. Clapped. Some cheered. I stepped away from the podium feeling lighter than I'd felt in years. Later, I walked alone through the garden. The fountain was lit from below, water catching moonlight. I thought about that cream-colored envelope. The single piece of paper that had ended everything and started everything. Revenge hadn't been loud or violent or cruel. It had been precise. Timed. True. And it had given me back something I thought I'd lost forever. Myself. I heard footsteps behind me. Turned. Sarah again, holding 2 glasses of champagne. Thought you might want company. Always. We stood there, listening to the fountain, the distant music, the sound of people inside enjoying a night without pretense. Do you ever regret it? Sarah asked quietly. The way you handled things with Kalen? I thought about it. Really thought. No, I said finally. I regret staying silent for so long. But ending it the way I did? That was the kindest thing I ever did for myself. She nodded. He called me once, months ago. Wanted me to testify that you'd fabricated evidence. What did you say? I hung up. I smiled. Good. We clinked glasses.
Drank.
Stood there a while longer. Inside, someone started a toast. Laughter echoed out into the night.
I closed my eyes and thought, this is what freedom sounds like.
Not loud, not flashy, just real. When I opened my eyes, Sarah was watching me. You know what I think?
What?
I think you didn't just give birth to your freedom. You gave birth to something a lot of other women needed too. Maybe she was right. Maybe that's what happens when you stop letting other people write your story. You write one worth reading. If this story resonated with you, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next powerful story. Drop a comment below sharing your thoughts. Your voice might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, share it with them. Sometimes the stories that change us are the ones we pass along. See you in the next one.